Hey everybody, I'm Matt Fullerton. This is
Lewis Kim.
And we are here to talk about a lesson we learned this last week when we went down to Georgia to take a look at these assisted living facilities. So when we learn things like this, we like to try to share it with everyone so you can use this information and have better deals going forward. So we've just coined the term being mooned, which actually we didn't coin, it's been around forever. But in our case, it's we were mooned by this investor who decided to show his ass while we were down in Georgia. And just for a little pretext here, we've raised a lot of capital from a lot of people, but they've mostly been within our sphere, our network, people we know. So this is the first outside person that we didn't have an existing relationship with or even a referral with that we've had to deal with.
Someone that wasn't affiliated with us.
Yeah, not affiliated with us in any way.
Yeah.
And it burned us a little bit to the tune of about $1,000. And we're going to talk about the lessons we learned right now.
Yeah, and in the grand scheme of the deal and what's going on, it's not a huge sum of money, but it is. It still stings, right? So what we're going to cover in this video is we're going to talk about the lessons that we've learned, talk about the process that we created, because the first lesson that we learned is we didn't have a process. And then we'll talk about the individual pieces. So, I mean, if we're talking about the process, what we've determined is we've got a 5-step process now. And the first thing we're going to determine is whether or not an investor is a cultural fit. Yes, it does matter whether or not the investor's own values align with the company's values and what we're trying to do.
And in this case, they do not align in the slightest.
Right.
And that was a big, big misstep from us. And there was, when, to be fair, there were warning signs from early on, from as soon as the airport, there were warning signs, and we just kind of overlooked those, hoping we could bring things along, and it just kind of kept piling on as we went.
The second thing is also with the investor that you've got is this person that doesn't have a relationship with you, is understanding what their investment needs are and whether or not they can communicate what their desires are and what their long-term plans are. Because again, it goes back to alignment. If you're doing a short-term, high-yield play and what they want is lower yield, consistent cash flow, that's not a fit. Yeah. So that's the second thing, is just knowing what their needs are, so see if they're a fit or not. The third thing is a personality fit and their attitude, right? Whether or not that person's personality type is something that we want to deal with.
And this is another one that I was texting Lewis from the airport. Lewis took an earlier flight than I did, and I met with this guy first, and right away there were some qualities that kind of stood out to me as, oh man, this guy's going to grate on me. And that did in fact happen, and then it continued to happen while we were down in Georgia.
That's so the fourth step in our process is the red flags.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And I think we saw these red flags pretty early. In fact, just the fact that this is a single man in his early 60s who's living alone, has a home that's free and clear, is renting out all of his other rooms to students while he lives essentially in the downstairs living room. It's a red flag for someone who's willing to put up a large sum of money, because this may be everything he has, and the way they're attached to it is they may not be able to tolerate the risk. And those kind of things, and Matt will kind of explain, we started seeing these things even more in communication about this particular person was very thrifty and really could not take risks.
I think thrifty is probably putting it lightly. We discovered this person bought a vehicle with a salvage title rather than buying a new vehicle. And one of the things you might learn, when you're buying vehicles, is never buy a vehicle with a salvage title. A lot of times they're not insurable. They're essentially worthless at resale. It's because the vehicle has been total lost by an insurance company and then rebuilt. So this person bought one of those. This person drove cross-country in the most basic possible rental car in order to save himself a few $100s. This person walked a mile in a walking boot to save himself $30 on an Uber charge. So, I mean, those are the kind of things that stick out right away as well. This person is extremely frugal, probably no risk tolerance. These things could be issues. And by the time these things started popping up, because we did not follow our process in the first place, it was a little too late and we were stuck.
Well, and so this kind of leads into the fifth thing, which was the investment fit, right? Does our particular investment fit what that person's needs are? And because we never had this conversation about what their needs were, we didn't know, but in conversation subsequently, when things got a little bit heated about communication of the fact that he was going to pay for things and he ultimately decided not to, we didn't know what his overall need was from the money that was coming into play. So whether or not this fit, long-term, short-term, is it a fit for this particular person? Because if it's not, you should cut it off right there. And it goes back to the other lessons, right? So the second thing we learned in the lesson, which the process will do, is confirming the fit, right? do they really fit as an investor? Do they fit their capital needs? And do they fit for this particular investment? These are things that really matter.
And the answer is a pretty much unilateral no across the board in all of these things. In this case, the person had the money, and that's it. Everything else wasn't in line.
And so the third thing, we learned this a hard way because it was a last minute trip. This was someone who had a large sum of money to put in the deal. It was roughly about 25 to 30% of our total needs in terms of the equity raise.
So a big chunk. It's a big checkbox for fundraising.
We didn't explicitly communicate with him on the travel needs and what happened in terms of the cost. And then when we got back and we're asking for reimbursement, Matt had a fun time communicating with this person.
So essentially, the person was upset when we initially booked this trip because we didn't book travel for him. So I said, because of these thoughts, like, hey, people usually want to pick their own flight, pick their own hotel, spend the money they want. I said, hey, here's what I can do. I can send you the itinerary we have, and you can see if you want it and you want to book it. He goes, no, I'm not looking to book anything. I don't want to make any arrangements. Just book it for me. So we did. And we got down there. We stayed in the hotel. We took the flights. We came back. And I told him, okay, here's the invoices. You have the receipts for reimbursement. And he's telling me, I would never have spent that money. I would have spent $50 and stayed at the Knights Inn across the street. And I said, well, that's fine if you want bed bugs. And he literally said, I have a process for checking bed bugs that takes 10 minutes. So this person not only refuses to refund us the money that we spent on him because he thinks it was more than he was willing to spend. He wanted to drive to Georgia. He would have driven to Georgia, stayed in a Fleabag motel, or maybe even the car, based on this guy, and would have eaten at McDonald's the whole time. And that's just not something that we want to do. We want to treat investors the way we like to treat ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is when I started communicating with him, because at a certain point, Matt needed to take a step back because, listen, it gets frustrating. And so I came in and I was even more frustrated than Matt was because this guy ultimately thought that we were somehow trying to woo him by taking him on this trip. Yeah. And it's the kind of thing where we just, as an investor, the size of the deal that we're dealing with, it doesn't warrant that kind of use. And you've got to be smart about how you use your money. And so for us, in terms of wooing, we took him out to a really nice restaurant that sits on the Chattahoochee River in Atlanta. It was a $200 lunch. And we figured that was sort of our bonus. And actually, we paid for all of his meals, and we weren't expecting a reimbursement on that.
Paid for meals, paid for the car, paid for all that stuff. We weren't expecting. We just wanted the flight and the hotel back.
Right, which he had agreed to. So, you can see that there's big lessons learned. And along those way, the fourth lesson that we learned very quickly, because we came back and we had to scramble and start communicating with other people, is that there's always going to be more capital than deals. So if you have a legitimate deal, you need to treat it as precious. And that investor should be just as grateful, if not more grateful, that you can bring them a deal and give them a return on their money, because there's so many places out there. You can speak to numerous people right now in this climate with interest rates being where they are. Their cash is depreciating. So if you can bring them a legitimate deal, and especially this kind of deal, which was medium term, where the potential upside, and this is it's a great potential deal. I mean, we can probably, I think our pro forma is in the neighborhood of 12 to 15% a year, and then at the time of the exit, which this is not going to be a long-term hold, there's the very, very possible chance of that investor collecting 40 to 50% on their money because of what we could add value to.
Yeah, that's very possible. And this gentleman felt like he was providing value to us, where I had to actually tell him at one point, sir, we're bringing you this deal. You have the opportunity here, not us. We can always find more of you.
Yeah.
But we have this deal. There's only one of this deal. So that's something to keep in mind, is there's always money, but deals are short, especially right now in this market. Deals are very short.
Right. So to recap, our lessons learned from being mooned on this last trip to Atlanta, when it comes to dealing with investors: 1, make sure you have a process in place to vet the investor.
Yes.
2, confirm that they're a fit financially, with their investment means, and whether or not they're a cultural fit, right? The third thing is always communicate explicitly. And from working with other investors in the past, I can tell you, we do a fantastic job of communicating when we're in the deal with our investors. If there's a problem, you need to get bad news out quick, and then prepare them for what's coming, because it's all about expectations.
Absolutely.
In this situation, both of us did not do the best job communicating on the front end. And then the fourth thing, which is really, really important, is make sure you remember and don't forget this fact that there's always more capital than deals.
Yeah, make sure you're valuing yourself.
So I'm Lewis Kim
Matt Fullerton.
with Beltway Mergers and Acquisitions. Hopefully you found this informative, and if you'd like to hear more content or see more content from us, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below.
Thanks, everybody.